My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. Now today, what I'm going to do is give you a market update of what's going on in the largest market in this part of the state over in Anchorage. Now, we're going to be talking about the residential condo and the multifamily market. This continues to be a pretty interesting market, so we'll kind of dive in and take a look, see what's going on there. Before we get started, do make sure you give this video a like if you haven't done so already. Do make sure you subscribe to receive more information like this. And without further ado, let's go and jump into today's market update. The first thing that we want to see is what is going on in the residential market as far as the inventory goes. Now, what we see over here is average, well, not average, but for the past month that we have up to this point, is that the inventory went from about 564 down to about 312 this year. So even though the inventory was down from the year before, it's definitely taken a precipitous drop in inventory from where we were the year before. So that's number one. Inventory is really down on the residential side. Now the second thing we want to look at, which I'm sure everyone's going to be asking me about, is what's going on with the average sold price. So we see over here, average sold price went from about 402 this time last year to 432,000 this year. So that's right, we've seen a $30,000 jump just on that one specific month that we have. So across the board, we're seeing that there is an increase in the average sold price. So that's something we'll talk more about in the summary. But yes, across the board, we're seeing an increase in the average sold price. The next thing we're going to check out is what's going on with the number of properties that are actually selling in this market. Keep in mind, inventory is way down, but we're seeing that we're seeing that the number of properties that actually sold went from about 211 last year, the same time period, to about 281 properties that actually sold this year. So we are seeing an increase in the overall number of properties that are selling. Again, talk about more about that in the summary. Now let's go and check out and see what's going on with the condo market. Over here, it's kind of a similar story of what we're seeing for what we're seeing in the residential side. Not quite as extreme though. We're seeing that there was about 296 condos that were on the market last year. Now there's about 230 odd condos that are on the market. So proportionally, still a pretty sizable decrease in the number of condos that are on the market as far as the inventory goes. Now the next thing that's kind of interesting is, even though we see the inventory going way down, we're actually seeing that the average sold price went down very slightly, roughly about $3,000. So we see that the average sold price this time last year was about $231,000. This year, it's roughly about $228,000. But you look across and see the different. Look across there and see the different months up there. You do see across the board, we are seeing an increase month over month for where we were this time last year. So we are seeing an increase year over year, but just for that specific month, we are seeing a slight decrease in the average sold price. So, but again, we'll talk more about that in the summary. Lastly, let's take a look and see how many properties actually sold during this time period as far as condos go. So we had roughly about 64 condos that sold this time last year. This year, 119. So proportionally, about a 50% increase. Or I'm sorry, is that correct? We've seen a doubling of the number of properties that have actually sold compared to last year. So that's really indicative of a healthy market. Talk about more about it in the summary. The summary is going to be awesome. You can hear we're going to be talking about a lot. But that's definitely something that is kind of a big thing as far as the inventory goes for the condos. Let's take a quick break real quick, and here is your real estate tip of the week. So if you are an investor, do your math, okay? This is the most important part. You do this before you even go and look at the property, okay? It's not like buying a regular residential house where the color of the paint, this and that, the cosmetics are really important. When you are an investor, the numbers are the only thing that matter when it comes down to it. If you can get pretty good cash flow on a property that is a complete dog, and it's better than what you can get, like you're in the hole for another property that looks really good, guess which one you should go with as an investor, okay? You need to make the shift and go from just being a homeowner who happens to be looking for a fourplex and make the shift to being an investor where all your decisions are predicated off of actually making a good decision as far as the numbers go. For example, I myself was looking for a fourplex here in the area just recently, and I sat down, looked at comparing two fourplexes side by side. One of them, I was like, okay, well, this one looks really good, it's cheaper, and I'm not going to tell you how much it is because I'm not going to call people out, but I was looking at it, I was like, okay, it's cheaper, it's in a good part of town, this one, has some good chances. But after running through all the numbers, I saw, holy cows, even all rented out, which it's not going to be all rented out for the first year because I'm going to be living in one of the units, but even all rented out, I'm going to be losing $100 a month. So not even cash flowing anything. So if anything, this property is a money pit. If I'm serious about buying this property, I'm going to need it for like $90,000 less than what they're asking for just to get any kind of a decent return on this thing. And if you're an investor, return's the only thing that matters. So I was just like, yeah, I'm going to have to not pursue this one at all. But just looking at really a superficial level, totally would have walked into that and woken up, 2-3 years from now, really regretting it. So make sure you do your numbers if you're an investor. It is the first and arguably only thing that matters when you're making an investment. So that's going to be your tip of the week. And let's jump back into, well, actually, that's perfect timing. Let's go see what's going on with the multifamily properties over in Anchorage. Now, similar to the residential and condo market, we are seeing that the number of active properties on the market for the multifamily has had a decrease. Now, it hasn't been as drastic. So we went from about 181 multifamilies that were on the market last year to this year, there's about 156. So we are seeing that there's a decrease in inventory, not nearly as precipitous as what we saw with the other two segments of the market, though. Now, this is where it starts getting really rodeo as far as the multifamilies go here. We see that we average sold price last year was about $376,000 rounding up. This year, it's closer to about $450,000. So that sounds insane. That's crazy. We're seeing an enormous spike in prices. Let's calm down a little bit. I'll explain why that probably is in the summary. Finally, let's look at the number of overall multifamily properties that have actually sold in this market up to this point, or at least for the month that we're looking at here. So this time last year, we sold about 16 multifamilies. This year, it's 33. So that's a pretty good indication for what's going on in the multifamily sector. We'll talk more about that in the summary, which we are right here during that time. Let's talk about what all this actually means. All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you just the bare bones breakdown for what we're seeing in the residential, condo, and multifamily, and then I'm going to tell you what its implications are for you as a buyer, seller, or investor, because investor is different from a buyer. So, number one, on the residential side, we are seeing way less inventory than what we saw about this time last year. It's down to about half or third of what it was available last year. Not quite as extreme as we see in the Mat-Su Valley. Inventory is still way down. The demand remains very high, though, evidenced by the fact that we are still selling more properties this time than we did last year, and the average sold price year to date is up 3.25%. So that's pretty good indication for the residential market. It means there's a lot of demand. Now, looking at the condo market, it's going to be a pretty similar story to what we saw over with the residential market. There's going to be less inventory, not nearly as precipitous as what we saw over on the residential side, but there is less inventory, and we're seeing an increase of 3.82% is what we're seeing over on the condo side. Finally, let's talk about what's going on with the multifamily properties in Anchorage. So what we're seeing is, again, less inventory. Not quite as big of a cut as we saw in the others, but there's less inventory. Looking at the average sold price, I mean, that looks insane just looking at it. But keep in mind, multifamilies incorporates everything from the little duplex that somebody's selling all the way to like the big commercial size 30 property or 30 unit property that somebody's selling. So it's not too hard to get huge spikes in those prices, okay? But across the board, and that's really what we're looking at, across the board we're seeing about a 5% increase overall for the number of properties, or for the average sold price for the properties that are selling. So what that tells us is that despite everything that's happening, multifamily and investing in Anchorage continues to be pretty popular. And the reason for that is that if I can go get a deal locked in right now for an interest rate of about mid 2%, that's going to be pretty good. That's really going to help me later on when I'm trying to, when we're paying rents and I have to factor the mortgage into the monthly expenses. So for that reason, we're seeing a lot of investors are choosing now to try to jump in and take advantage of what we have right now, because as an investor, it's not necessarily the price itself that's going to make it a good or bad deal. It is the cash flow that you're going to be getting from the deal. You can cover a lot of evils over if you've got good cash flow, and one thing that helps you with that is having a low interest rate, which means the mortgage is low, which means it's easier to cash flow. Does that make sense? I sure hope that it does. So that's going to be kind of your breakdowns for all those different markets. Now, if you're a seller, this is all good. Okay, it's all rosy for you at this point. The big thing you need to think about is get on as soon as possible and take advantage of this market. Okay, sometimes your situation isn't going to line up perfectly. That's something we have to work with. But best case scenario is what I'm giving you. You can jump on quick and take advantage of the market that we're currently in. If you're a buyer, this is where you have to kind of do some soul searching. If you have to buy now, you want to buy now, we can make it happen. We just have to be motivated, and we have to understand this is a different market that we're in at the moment. So we're just going to have to jump in and kind of have that gazelle intensity of, we're going to do this to survive getting chased by this cheetah behind us. That's the kind of intensity we need to have if we're trying to compete. If you're an investor, again, good time to be looking at properties because the interest rates are so low. Don't completely lose your shirt and overpay for properties, but it's certainly a good time to be investing. Just make sure you do your due diligence and make sure none of the tenants of the properties that you're looking at have applied for the CDC moratorium or any other garbage where they're trying to say that they can't pay their rent. So that's what we're seeing as far as the market update here. I sure hope this has been useful. If you need to get in contact with me directly, please do so through my Facebook page. Link for that is going to be in the description section down below. And I sure hope this has been useful, and talk to you next week.